Hey everyone, I'm Brendan Kelleher, and welcome to my final video in my Star Trek movie retrospective series, in which I'll be taking a look back at Star Trek Beyond, third and final movie set in the Kelvin timeline. There will be plot spoilers, and with that out of the way, let's get started. Released in 2016, Star Trek Beyond was directed by Justin Lin. The story begins 3 years into the Enterprise crew's 5-year mission to explore deep space. After arriving at the new starbase Yorktown for shore leave and resupply, the life pod drifts out of a nearby uncharted nebula. Its occupant, Kalara, claims her ship and crew are stranded on a planet in the nebula named Ultimate. When the Enterprise is dispatched on a rescue mission to Ultimate to pick up Kalara's crew, the ship is attacked by a massive swarm of ships, and the ship is boarded by apparently alien invaders and led by a warlord named KRALLS. As the invaders attempt to steal the Abernath, an alien relic recovered on a recent away mission, the Enterprise is torn apart and Kirk orders the crew to abandon ship just before it crashes onto the planet's surface. With Kirk and several members of the ship's crew separated on the surface of the planet, they attempt to rescue the rest of the survivors that have been captured by KRALLS and stop him from using the Abernath to destroy Yorktown Station. During the run-up to the release of Star Trek Into Darkness in 2013, director J.J. Abrams had been officially hired by Disney to helm Star Wars: The Force Awakens, so his involvement in the next Star Trek movie would be as producer only. With the Star Trek franchise approaching its 50th anniversary in 2016, there was no question that the next film in the series would have to come out that year. Screenwriter Roberto Orci, who had co-written the scripts for the last 2 movies, was initially announced as director, but after nearly a year of working on a script for the film, dropped out by the end of 2014. With time running out before the film had to begin production in 2015, Simon Pegg, who played Scotty, was hired along with writer Doug Young to write a completely new script. Pegg had experience with writing, as he had co-created the Channel 4 sitcom Spaced, as well as co-writing, along with Edgar Wright, what is now known as the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy: Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. While Wright was considered as a possible director for the new Trek film, Justin Lin, who had at that time directed 4 movies in the Fast and Furious franchise, eventually landed the job. Lin, as it turned out, was a huge Star Trek fan, and despite having comparatively little time to prep the film for shooting in mid-2015, was enthusiastic about trading fast cars for starships.
It was interesting because I do have a passion for Star Trek. I grew up with the original series, and there's a love for it. But I also understand that there's other people whose passion supersedes mine, you know? So I talked to them, and it was really getting that context that was very important.
With the last few films having Earth as a central location, the creative team wanted to get back to the spirit of the original series and set the movie in deep space during the Enterprise's 5-year mission, what would essentially be a feature-length episode with a massive budget. So the movie begins with the Enterprise 3 years into their 5-year mission to explore deep space. In Kirk's personal log, he mentions it's the 966th day in deep space, which is possibly a reference to the date the first episode of Star Trek aired in the United States, September 1966. Kirk is on a diplomatic mission to deliver the Abernath, a piece of an ancient weapon to the Tenaxians. While this object turns out to be an important part of the main plot, this whole sequence of Kirk negotiating with some fierce-looking aliens is an amusing start to the movie. In a way, it's a scene that could have come from Galaxy Quest, the spoof Tim Allen comedy inspired by Star Trek. Right from the start of the movie, there is a distinct change in style from the previous 2 films, both in tone and the way the Enterprise is shot. Lin comes up with unique ways of showing off the Enterprise using these very abstract angles. And one particular shot, the way he depicts the Enterprise at warp is different from anything we've seen before in the franchise. Throughout the history of Star Trek, there have been mention of warp fields or static warp bubbles. In many articles, warp speed has been described as when the ship's nacelles warp space around the ship, but this is where we actually get to see it. The early scene with Kirk and McCoy as they drink to the former's birthday is yet another callback to the series to Wrath of Khan. They just can't help themselves. But it's a well-written scene with some good humour, as Kirk ponders the fact that he is now 1 year older than his father got to be.
He joined Starfleet because he believed in it. I joined on a dare.
You joined to see if you could live up to him. You spent all this time trying to be George Kirk, and now you're wondering just what it means to be Jim.
Kirk seems to be going through some personal crisis, as he considers leaving the ship to pursue an admiral's position. I have to say I've never really liked this particular aspect of the story. Kirk is presumably in his early 30s here, and should be having the time of his life. He's gotten everything he wanted. He has his own ship, and he's having great adventures with a crew he's gotten close to. So I don't understand why he's doubted himself so much. It made sense in The Wrath of Khan since Kirk had just turned 50, was an admiral, and was missing being a starship captain. The real love of his life was the Enterprise. Here and beyond, Kirk is way too young to be having such a midlife crisis. Anyway, the Enterprise docks at Yorktown Station, a new Federation starbase. While we've seen starbases before in the movie series, Yorktown Station is unlike anything we'd seen before. The scale of this thing is massive, and speaking as someone who has played the Mass Effect video games for many years now, it reminds me of the Citadel from that particular series, and I would be very surprised if the filmmakers weren't influenced by it in the design of this station. Since this is one of the few movies that have no scenes set on or anywhere near Earth, the creator's idea to have stakes for the film was to create an Earth by proxy. Since Krall, the villain of the movie, wants to attack the Federation directly, Yorktown represents everything that the Federation stands for, given that it's clearly the result of many different races working together. Which is really what the optimistic future of Star Trek is all about, and a large part of its appeal. One noticeable character change, and this aspect of the film is so minor, but one worth mentioning, is the reveal that Sulu is gay and has a family.
Oh my!
On arrival at Yorktown Station, he reunites with his daughter and his husband, who is played by the film's co-writer, Doug Young. His daughter is possibly Demora, the grown-up character of which that was seen briefly in the original timeline in the Star Trek Generations. It's interesting that they chose Sulu for this character development, given that in the original timeline there was evidence that he had a healthy interest in the ladies, although he could, for all we know, have been bisexual. This was obviously the filmmakers' way of being more inclusive in terms of representation, but this may have backfired on them slightly, given that the original actor to have played Sulu, George Takei, who although is well known for being openly gay, has said that he always played Sulu as heterosexual. Still, you have to give filmmakers credit for being more inclusive, although it's such a minor part of the film that it can easily be cut for countries like China that frown upon such things. The film's main plot begins as a life pod drifts in from a nearby nebula. Its one occupant, an alien named Clara, claims her ship and crew crashed on a planet called Ultimate. The Enterprise is sent on a mission to the planet to recover Clara's crew, but it turns out to be a trap when they are attacked by a massive swarm of alien ships. This is one of the longest action sequences in any Star Trek film, as the Enterprise is literally taken apart during the battle. The warp missiles are cut off first, and then its throat, so to speak, is cut as the ship is boarded by apparently alien invaders. This is where we are introduced to the film's main villain, Krall, and he's after the Abernath device seen at the start of the film. After Kirk gives the order to abandon ship, the Enterprise, or what's left of it, crashes onto the surface of Ultimate. This isn't the first time an Enterprise has been destroyed in the Star Trek movies, of course, with previous incarnations of the ship meeting a similar end in The Search for Spock in Generations. Like those movies, this destruction was spoiled in the trailers. However, in Beyond, this destruction occurs in the film's opening half hour, which is actually a quite bold move by the filmmakers. While it doesn't have quite the same emotional impact of the ship's destruction in Star Trek 3, for example, this particular shot as Kirk ejects in his life pod conveys what a tragic loss the ship's destruction is to the character. Incidentally, Michael Giacchino's musical score here during the Enterprise's final death throes is some of his finest work for the series. Although this particular track on the soundtrack CD is rather sarcastically called "Hitting the Saucer Pretty Hard." With the ship destroyed and most of the crew captured by the invaders, Kirk and his main bridge crew are separated into several groups on the surface of the planet. What's interesting about this is that the main characters are broken up into pairs, mostly unlike any way we've seen before in either this timeline or the original. Kirk is paired up with Chekhov, Sulu with Uhura, McCoy with Spock, which is always comedy gold, and Scotty meets up with an alien scavenger named Jayla.
I am Jayla, and you are Montgomery Scott.
Aye, Scotty.
Come now, Montgomery Scotty.
Jayla is played by Sofia Boutella. Boutella started her career as a dancer, appearing in Madonna's Confessions tour and as the main character in the music video for Hollywood Tonight by Michael Jackson. She broke into acting playing the crazy assassin Gazelle in Kingsman: The Secret Service. The character of Jayla was actually named after the nickname for actress Jennifer Lawrence, who was initially linked with the role. Despite Butella being cast in the role instead, the name was kept. Jayla is one of the best new characters of the Kelvin timeline, and her scenes with Scotty are some of the best and funniest of the film. Her alien design is very unique for Star Trek, and despite her tough exterior, she has a very childlike quality to her, and her fascination with ancient human culture like rock music is very amusing. She and Scotty have a great comedy double act, and it's a real shame that we'll probably never see this character again, as she's a great addition to the crew, and I would like to have seen her in more adventures with this cast. Despite the destruction of the Enterprise, Kirk and Chekhov, along with Clara, head back to the wreckage of the ship to use the ship's scanners to locate the crew. It's here where Kirk outs Clara as a traitor, who is revealed to be working with Krall to retrieve the Abernath device. The following action sequence as Kirk and Chekhov escape from Clara and Krall's soldiers is very inventive, as the pair use the ship's wreckage to their advantage, as they manage to activate the saucer section's thrusters to flip it over and slide down the hull. If I have any complaints here, is that the lighting is a little too dark, and the editing is a bit hectic, but it's a fun sequence nonetheless. Clara meets her end here, as the saucer section crashes down on top of her. I've always found it a little odd that she doesn't seem to even try to escape this. As Justin Lin explains in his commentary, he had a different ending for her in mind, and changed it in editing. So Jayla takes Scotty to her house, where he finds out that it's actually the wreckage of the USS Franklin, a lost NX-class starship from a century earlier. It's here where the movie acknowledges the events of the TV series Star Trek Enterprise. The design of the ship is based off the NX-01 from Enterprise, captained by Jonathan Archer. Despite the rebooted timeline, the events of that show are still canon. Kirk and Chekhov meet up with Scotty and Jayla, and in a cool little Easter egg, Scotty half jokes that maybe the Franklin was grabbed by a giant green space hand. This, of course, is a reference to the original series episode Who Mourns for Ed and Ace, where this literally happened to the Enterprise. What remains a mystery is what happened to the Franklin's crew. It's interesting on rewatching the film how the movie's main twist should have been so obvious, but yet for me at least, it wasn't. More on that later. With the majority of the crew captured by Krall and his followers, Kirk comes up with a plan to rescue them, involving him using a motorbike stored on the Franklin and combining it with Jayla's holographic technology. What follows is probably the most Fast and Furious inspired action sequence of the film, where Kirk distracting Krall's soldiers by tearing around on his bike and generating holographic copies of himself while doing so. It certainly wouldn't look out of place in a Fast and Furious movie nowadays. Well, if a Fast and Furious movie was set in space, that is. What are the chances of that happening?
We're in outer space!
Told you numbers don't lie.
This is crazy, bro!
Never mind. With the crew rescued, Krall escapes armed with the Abernath, now assembled with the final piece that was hidden inside Ensign Sill's head. This whole plot aspect of assembling the Abernath, by the way, seems to be another similarity with Justin Lin's Fast and Furious films. The last couple of entries in that series involved some kind of search for a missing piece of a superweapon. You can even say that, like Fast and Furious, this movie is all about
Family.
Krall and his swarm ships attack Yorktown Station, and Kirk and his crew, now having flown the Franklin into space, come up with a plan to defeat Krall's fleet, using a method that on paper sounds so completely ridiculous, it must have been an unused concept Justin Lin had for a Fast and Furious movie, using heavy metal music. In this case, Sabotage by the Beastie Boys.
That's a good choice.
As crazy as this sounds, it actually does work in the film, even though the song itself was badly used in the movie's first trailer, which really did try to advertise it as a Fast and Furious style movie. So with Krall's swarm ships destroyed, Kirk and the crew chase Krall through the inner workings of Yorktown Station, forcing him to crash land, and in my favourite shot of the film, the Franklin bursts through from the lake of Central Plaza. After searching through Krall's ship, they find out the truth to Krall's origins. Krall is actually Captain Balthazar Edison, and he and his followers are the former crew of the Franklin. They were ex-Mako soldiers who became Starfleet officers when the Federation was formed. This is another welcome tie-in to the continuity of Star Trek Enterprise. The third season of that show depicted the beginning of the Xindi conflict. When that alien race attacked Earth with a superweapon, Captain Archer and his crew were sent on a mission into the Expanse, a dangerous region of space, to find the Xindi and stop them. During the mission, Archer had a team of Makos, which were basically the 22nd century equivalent of Special Forces soldiers. It's interesting that the truth behind the villain's true identity was kept secret in a much better way than Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness. Here, it's a vital part of the plot, and it helps that Krall isn't a legacy character from any other incarnation of Trek. The final fight is, like the previous film, something that looks more suited to a Marvel superhero movie, as Kirk fights to stop Krall releasing the Abramat bioweapon in the station's ventilation system. Both characters fly through the air due to changing gravity effects. It's here as Kirk confronts Edison that where it's clear that the film shares a similar theme with Star Trek VI. Edison, like General Chang and several Starfleet officers in that movie, found it too hard to make peace with former enemies and didn't want to change. Here, Chris Pine's Kirk tells Edison why change is important and inevitable.
We change. We have to. We spend the rest of our lives fighting the same battles.
It's a very old school piece of Trek moralizing that would make Gene Roddenberry proud. Anyway, Kirk manages to defeat Krall before the weapon is activated, and is rescued by Spock and McCoy before being sucked into space. Later, the crew spring a surprise birthday party for Kirk, and despite the good cheer, they don't forget to honour the friends they've lost. It's here where this ending is very bittersweet, as actor Anton Yelchin, who played Chekhov, sadly died in a horrible accident only a month before the film's release, the film itself being dedicated to Yelchin and Leonard Nimoy. It's ironic that here, in what seems to be, at the time of this recording, not only the final Star Trek movie to feature this cast, but the whole motion picture series, that Spock finds a photo of Prime Spock's shipmates in a nice tribute to the original crew. In the end, Kirk decides to stay as captain of the brand new, built in seemingly record time Starship Enterprise A, and in an appropriate send-off, the entire main cast speak the final classic Star Trek mission statement, as the film draws to a close. Overall, Star Trek Beyond is a fitting tribute to what was at that time 50 years of the greatest sci-fi franchise of all time. It's the one movie that most resembles an original series episode, except with a massive budget. It's fun, it's colourful. What I really enjoy about it is that unlike the last few films in the series, it feels very new and offers a lot of sights and aliens that we've never seen before. While you can argue as to whether it was really necessary to destroy the Enterprise for the third time in the movie series, visually it's an absolutely stunning sequence to watch. The cast here all play well off each other and truly feel like a family that have served together for many years. Idris Elba's villain may appear to be a very generic villain at first, but it's on rewatching the movie, knowing what his true identity is, that he actually becomes a much more interesting villain than he originally seemed. Michael Giacchino's score is, once again, gorgeous. He comes up with great new themes for Yorktown Station and the new characters of Krall and Jayla. If I have any nitpicks about the movie, is that the editing of some of the fight scenes are a little too fast and furious, no pun intended, for my liking. But I think overall, this may actually be my favourite movie out of the Kelvin timeline. Unfortunately, when Star Trek Beyond was released in summer 2016, it faced heavy competition from the likes of Suicide Squad and Jason Bourne. While the film was well received by fans and critics, the film only made $343 million on a $185 million budget. This was a lesser box office gross than the previous two films in the series, and when you factor in marketing and other costs, Star Trek Beyond more than likely failed to make a profit. At the time of this recording, it appears that Beyond is, for the time being, the last movie in the Star Trek feature series. While there have been talks of a fourth movie in the Kelvin timeline, which at one point was supposed to bring back the character of George Kirk, played by Chris Hemsworth in the 2009 reboot, the film never got the go-ahead, allegedly due to pay disputes with the cast. For a while, Pulp Fiction director Quentin Tarantino was rumoured to make the next movie in the series, but again that seemed to fizzle out. If Beyond turns out to be the last film in the official Star Trek movie series, it's a good one to go out on, but I have a feeling that someday the Starship Enterprise will fly once again on movie screens around the world. And that is it for my look back at the Star Trek movie series. For those of you watching, I hope you enjoyed them, as I certainly enjoyed making them. If it's not too much trouble, please like the video, consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, click the bell for notifications, and let me know in the comments, what was your favourite Star Trek movie of the Kelvin timeline? Most importantly, I hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.